The Milwaukee Bucks have yet again concluded their season in a very disappointing fashion. And not only that, the fashion in which they disappointed was eerily similar to what we witnessed last year. The Bucks were outmatched by a lower-seeded team. Giannis struggled significantly in the half court against a well-disciplined defensive unit. The supporting cast from Milwaukee disappeared numerous times throughout the series, and yet again, Coach Budenholzer was outcoached. But unlike last year, the outcome of another disappointing season could be detrimental to the Milwaukee Bucks' future. Because with Giannis only having one more year under his contract, it does beg the question, what exactly does Milwaukee do next? But before we talk about what's next for Milwaukee, I do believe it's important to talk about what exactly happened so we can get a better depiction of how disappointing this year was. Milwaukee this season finished with a league best 56 wins, which gave them a win percentage of nearly 77%, meaning that if the season wasn't shortened, Milwaukee would have finished with 63 games in the win column. The biggest hallmark to the Bucks' success is easily what they accomplished on the defensive end, as Milwaukee not only had the #1 ranked defense, but did so while having 3 players make the all-defensive team in Bledsoe, Giannis, and Lopez. And oh yeah, Giannis did win the Defensive Player of the Year award. With their size, lateral quickness, and communication, it made it extremely difficult for practically any team in the NBA to score on them consistently. Because of this effort on the defensive end, it easily translated to transition points, which not only aided the Bucks in being the fastest unit in the league, but also helped them being a top 10 offense in the NBA as well. Leading the charge was not only Giannis, as he was able to average roughly around 30 points a game while converting 55% of his shots in only 30 minutes of action, but also you had Chris Middleton, who had a career year averaging around 21 points and missed the 50-40-90 club by the skin of his teeth. And alongside those two, you had 4 other Bucks who could give you double figures on any given night. But as a wise man once said, with great power comes great responsibility, and the expectations for the Bucks have inflated alongside the development of Giannis. So this year, at worst, the projections were finals or bust, which honestly wasn't that far-fetched. With LeBron no longer being in the East, Kawhi taking his talents to the Western Conference, and Kevin Durant being sidelined for the entire season, unless you are a die-hard Philadelphia 76ers fan, Giannis is easily the only top 7 player in the NBA who resides in the Eastern Conference. And even if you do feel differently than I do about Embiid, it didn't really matter because the Sixers didn't even make it out of the first round, thus making the path to the finals even easier for the Bucks. Now, I know Milwaukee fans, Giannis was not 100%, but even when he was on the floor, they still struggled to score against Miami. And it's very interesting to me that no one wants to address the other side of the ball because either A, Milwaukee was god-awful defensively, or B, Miami just had a series where they were performing at an all-time high offensively against one of the best defensive units the league has offered in the past 5 years. But hey, of course, no one is going to give Miami their credit, so I'll just leave that up to you to where you lie on that argument. Instead, let's figure out who is to blame for this disappointing outcome. Now, as I grow older and become a bit more mature, I come to the conclusion that you can't just blame everything on one person, especially when it comes to a team sport. However, I truly believe that there is one massive flaw that has plagued the Milwaukee Bucks over the past 2 to 3 years. Now, does Coach Bud have to do a better job? Sure. And honestly, it was pretty alarming for the second straight year that Budenholzer was outcoached by one of his peers by a fairly wide margin. The lack of player movement and adjustments made it easy for Miami to defend Milwaukee. And honestly, I don't know why this took Budenholzer by surprise, because Toronto defended Milwaukee very similar last year. Now, does the supporting cast have to play better? Of course they do. Especially Chris Middleton and Eric Bledsoe, who at this point are building a reputation for not showing up in the playoffs. And I am pleasantly surprised how many people have pointed out the mistakes from the front office in Milwaukee, because the decision to jump the gun and give Eric Bledsoe that contract last year in and of itself was a massive mistake. But that flaw became a fatal one once it essentially meant that the Milwaukee Bucks were not going to be able to retain Malcolm Brogdon, who was coming off a season where he was averaging 15 points on 50-40-90 splits, and Milwaukee could have easily retained him since he was a restricted free agent and just matched the offer that he received from the Indiana Pacers. But in my opinion, all of those are just symptoms of one massive problem with the Bucks, and that is the development of Giannis. In a league where everyone is consumed with analytics and efficiency, and teams truly believe that they are working smarter, not harder, it does feel as if like basketball has dumbed down quite a bit. Now, some people are going to say that I'm just an old head yelling at this new era of basketball to get off my lawn. And part of that may be true. I do reminisce on Tim Duncan's mid-range bank shots from time to time, but even you have to admit it is pretty concerning that Giannis, analytically speaking, is one of the best offensive players in the league and has dominated the NBA to the tune of 2 MVP awards, and yet he can't consistently create his own shot in half-court offense. Now, I'm not going to turn into Harden and make claims that what Giannis is doing takes no skills at all, because that obviously isn't true. However, it's clear the only way to maximize that style of basketball, which essentially is a face-up game, is to marry it with a consistent jump shot, something that Giannis has been lacking his entire career. And instead of not only basing Giannis, but the entire Milwaukee Bucks' offense around the concept that Giannis can handle the ball, more than likely what the Bucks should have done was build around the idea of him being a post player. According to NBA.com, amongst players who played at least 30 games during a regular season and posted up at least 10% of the time or more, Giannis is easily one of the more productive post players. With a field goal percentage of 55.6%, which ranks 6th out of all players who qualified, and a points per possession of 0.92, which isn't that far from Karl Anthony Towns and actually higher than both Anthony Davis and Carmelo Anthony. And truth be told, it would be even higher than what it is now if Giannis was just a better free throw shooter. But unfortunately, Giannis only posts up 11 to 12% of the time. And that frequency went down even further during the playoffs, essentially meaning that despite Giannis's ridiculous advantage when it comes to his height, size, and strength, Giannis was kept in check by smaller defenders all throughout the playoffs, which is just completely unacceptable. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't great that Giannis can handle the ball and Euro-step his way to the basket with the best of them. However, I am trying to highlight the level of ignorance that you have to have if you're not willing to identify Giannis's inabilities. Because if you are the Milwaukee Bucks and you move Giannis down to the post, then you probably would have evaluated Malcolm Brogdon properly, since you would need another ball handler in the half-court offense, and kept him on the team. If you had Giannis scoring in the post more often and identified his weaknesses, then you probably would have assessed Chris Middleton a bit better and understand that you need a closer down the stretch. And also, if Giannis was in the post, it would give the Bucks offense way more complexity. And I have no doubt that Coach Bud understands how to structure an offense through the low post, since he was an assistant coach for the San Antonio Spurs since 1997, 1 year before Tim Duncan was drafted. But since none of that happened, the next question is, what's next for Milwaukee? Now, I'm not going to sit here and spend the rest of this video talking about how Giannis unfollowed his teammates on Instagram, and I'm not going to sit here and make a huge deal from a Woj tweet talking about how Giannis sat down with management for 3 hours, because truth be told, that happens with basically every team in the NBA, especially those who end their season in a disappointing fashion. Hey everyone, this is the face behind the voice. If you've never seen my face, make sure you click all the links in the description because I do have a podcast and a second channel. Nevertheless though, after rereading that tweet and also looking at the article, I decided that I do actually have a few things to kind of just say real briefly. When it comes to the NBA, my biggest pet peeve is when billionaires don't spend money on their franchises. Because if I was Giannis, but I'm not, but if I was, there's no way that I'm going to sit there for 3 hours and have someone tell me that they're going to start doing something that they should have already been doing. It is just so amazing to me how these small market owners will sit there and they think, oh, they think they got everything figured out. But you don't though. Don't sit there and tell me, we're not going to pay Malcolm Brogdon because, we don't want to dip too far into the luxury tax, or we don't want to pay luxury tax, just for you to then turn around a year later and say, you know what, Giannis, we're going to trade for Chris Paul and then pay him $40+ million. Like, what are you talking about? What are you saying? Same thing with OKC. OKC, that the ownership was like, man, I don't know about going too deep into the luxury tax because I don't want to have to pay a team that consists of Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka, and James Harden, just for them to then, 5 or 6 years later, spend mad money on a team that features Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Steven Adams getting paid $20 million in the back end of a Carmelo Anthony contract where he was overpaid just so they would get knocked out in the first round. Like, spend the money, bro. Just spend it. Spend it now. I hate it when I sit there and I see great talented players waste their first 7 to 8 years on an organization that isn't willing to spend the money. Spend it. You're a billionaire. Spend it. If not, I was going to say let me buy it, but I'm just a millionaire. I'm not a billionaire yet. I'll get there, though. I'll definitely get there. But I will acknowledge the fact that there are numerous teams in the NBA who have the capability of acquiring Giannis within the next year and a half. And with the Milwaukee Bucks running tight on cap space and really don't have that much flexibility on who they can bring onto the team, it is a very serious and interesting conversation to determine what's next for Giannis and the Bucks moving forward. And even with all that being true, honestly, Giannis just staying with the Bucks still may be his best option. Sure, there may be some teams that have the personnel that best suits Giannis. However, most of those organizations don't have a capable trading package to give to Milwaukee that will convince them to give up on their franchise player. And even if there are some organizations that do have the proper assets to go after Giannis, after trading all of those major pieces, the destination becomes less desirable. Unless we're talking about the Golden State Warriors, who technically speaking could give up Andrew Wiggins, this year's second overall pick, and Minnesota's first round pick next year, as well as a couple of other players or some more picks, which honestly is not only a very favorable situation for Giannis, but also a very interesting haul from the Warriors if I am Milwaukee. That is a very realistic transaction that I believe a lot of people are trying to undersell. But if I am the Bucks, I would just keep Giannis. It seems as if the worst case scenario is rebuilding, regardless if that means next year or the year after that. And if that's the case, I would just maximize the window of opportunity that I have with an all-time great player in Giannis. Because if we're going to be honest with ourselves, the odds that the Milwaukee Bucks will be put in this situation anytime soon is extremely unlikely. But with that being said, hopefully the Milwaukee Bucks will retain Giannis, trade for Chris Paul, who has proven that he can still provide enough productivity at such an advanced age and would fit into the offense quite well, as well as having an impact on the defensive end. But more importantly, it will give you a shot creator down the stretch of very important games, which is something that this team obviously needs. And as they continue to revamp the offense, I would move Giannis down to the post so you can even get some more consistent productivity from him, and that should also relieve some pressure off of a potential Chris Paul acquisition as well as Chris Middleton. But with all that being said, people, please let me know what you think about the video in the comment section below. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, click all the links in the description, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.